I know you've got an ear out for the start of the podcast, but before we jump into today's episode, I wanted to remind you to keep an eye out for Darrell Lee's limited edition Christmas treats, because they're in stores now. Like the iconic Christmas nougat pudding, so yummy and a gorgeous little gift. And some delicious Chrissy-themed twists on your favourite treats, like the Darrell Lee Rockley Road with chewy red and green jelly pieces, green and red crunchy milk chocolate balls, my favourites, and green apple and strawberry flavoured licorice. Watch them disappear. Your Christmas treats table will pop with colour and scrumptiousness. Spread some joy, bring the fun, and enjoy the Christmas tradition that is Darrell Lee. Hurry before they sell out. Darrell Lee makes Christmas better. This is The 5 of My Life with me, Nigel Marsh. The series where I talk to notable people about 5 of their favourite things. The way it works is my guests always choose a favourite film, book, song, place and possession. They tell me their choices in advance so I can research them, but they don't tell me why they've chosen them. That's the subject of our conversation. The reason I devised this series is I wanted to create a slightly different way to gain a genuine insight into the real lives and thoughts of prominent people. James Valentine is a journalist, musician, author, television presenter and family man. As if all that wasn't enough, in an incredible feat of multitasking, industriousness and longevity, he's also presented a hugely popular radio show for the ABC consistently for the last 30 years. James, given you're the one usually asking the questions, mate, how do you find the process of having the tables reversed and having to choose your fine items?
What? Who are you? Why? No, I hate this. Stop it now. I don't want to do it. Oh. Well, Nigel, as a radio person, I obviously love both the sound of my own voice and talking about myself. So, yeah, perfectly happy. Very, very good. I'd also, some of that premise of the intro, that's like a list of things I have done. I always think it's a bit, it's a bit of a lie when he goes, journalist, musician, this, that. At the moment, I'm a broadcaster.
You are a singular dimension Muppet, not a multitasking legend.
I am not a multitasking, miracle. I'm just sort of, I'm hacking through whatever I can hack through at any one point.
Right, okay. But in the panoply of your life, you've done a few things.
I've done a few things here and there. Always sort of seeking the same kind of thing, sort of personal stimulation, and then, which sounds a little bit uncomfortable, it's really that. I'm largely seeking to amuse myself and engage myself.
You actually want to enjoy your job?
Yeah.
How dare you?
Yeah, I know.
That notion, my dad, if you were talking about work satisfaction, he just wouldn't understand what you mean.
No.
The notion that you go to work and actually get fulfillment from it. So,
well, like your family background may be similar in that I would go so far as to say happiness was not necessarily a concept encouraged.
Yes.
That like if you said, but I want to be happy, they go, I'm sorry, what do you mean? Things like duty, responsibility, respectability, those sort of things were way more important than your own happiness as such. You didn't do things to seek, like I'm probably over-seeking to stimulate the pleasure part of my brain.
Yes.
I think my father gave that up at about 16.
That is so interesting. There were two things my dad would say. One, if I get to 70, then I thank the Lord, then I've had a good run. But his parenting philosophy was, if I can get you to 18 and you are not in jail, he'd often say this, then I've done my job. Okay, set the bar low.
Fairly low bar. Like, if I can get you 18, you're alive. Well done. Off you go out into life.
Now, the trouble is, I could talk to you probably for 3 hours without even getting to any of your choices, but I'm going to mention your film. You chose The Producers, 1967, Mel Brooks.
Yep.
Why?
Yeah. The Producers is something, it just has so much meaning for me, and I think it's just one of the great films. Like, if you ask me my favourite films, all of them will tend to be about show business. Like, I love Cabaret, I love The Producers, I love Woody Allen's Broadway, Danny Rose. And they're all, there's another funny little English film called Funny Bones, which is quite obscure, Jerry Lewis and Lee Evans. These are my favourite films. They're all show business. They're all, that's what they're about.
And they're all from a different era.
They're all old too, so I haven't been to the movies for about 27 years. The producers, the producers I love because one of my first like big professional jobs was I worked with Joe Camilleri. So I'm about 20 and I get a gig with Joe Camilleri, and so I've gone from like journeyman kind of saxophone player around Melbourne, just doing whatever gig there is, wedding band, bad swing band, and this sort of stuff. Bar mitzvahs, exactly, all that sort of stuff. And I get a gig with Joe. And so I'm off on the road in this, between Joe Depp and the Falcons and the Black Sorrows, he had a band called the Char Band, which was a 12-piece sort of salsa band. So I'm in the horn section doing this sort of stuff. The singer is one of the other singers is a woman called Jane Clifton, who's an actress and performer. Now, Jane is, feisty and tough and fantastic. And so I'm getting a lesson in show business from guys that have been around for 20 years already. It's wonderful. Jane says, you've got to see the producers. And so I go and see the producers. And this is, again, it harks to an era where there's no VHS. There's only movies on television or the repertory cinemas, things like the Valhalla and the Carlton Movie House and this sort of stuff. So I'm in Melbourne. So I go and see the producers. The original producers is incredibly funny all the way through. But it's also an essential treatise on show business.
Explain.
It says essentially the business of show is business. We're here to make money.
Money is honey.
Money is honey. The premise is I'll make more money if it's not a hit. That's the essential joke. Then it turns out to be a hit. So the other essential lesson is no one knows what a hit is. No one can ever pick what's going to be a hit, what's going to work. We all think we can. We all go, you're doing this because you want it to be the number one podcast in the world. It might be.
Yeah.
Or it may not. There's no way of predicting this. So then what I love about the producers is I've tracked it through my life. So I saw
all the remakes.
I saw all the remakes. So I saw it on stage. I'm not someone who travels a lot, but I happened to be in New York. It was on. Nathan Lane and Matthew Broderick in the lead roles. Unbelievable to be sitting in a Broadway theatre. The theatre they talk about in the producers is the theatre over the road from where you were sitting watching it.
Wonderful.
Fantastic. Then then it comes out as a movie. That wasn't too bad. But the final kicker with the producers is watch Series 4 of Curb Your Enthusiasm with Larry David, where Larry is cast as Max Bialystock in the producers, and they replay the whole joke of the producers through the whole series, culminating in Mel Brooks and Anne Murray sitting in a bar, revealing that they've cast Larry so that it's a flop. But it turns out to be a hit. They do the whole thing again. It's fantastic. I was weeping with this sort of vast sort of here's my whole life. Like, here's me remembering Jane introducing this film to me and what it meant to me at the time and all this sort of stuff. Just all the jokes being done again and with Larry David doing it. It was just unbelievably beautiful.
But isn't it wonderful when an item means that much to you? So in your honour, I watched that film.
Right.
And I hadn't seen it before. And it's almost the entire film is worth it for the line, where did I go right?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, you go, that's
where did I go right? But there's so many quotable lines. It's Gene Wilder and Zero Mostel, and it's just... it's incredibly funny in so many ways. I'm wet, I'm hysterical. Like I said to somebody the other day, which felt dangerous in this Me Too moment, it was a young female producer and like radio producer, and she was a bit sort of embarrassed about putting herself forward. And I just said, listen, baby, if you got it, flaunt it. Now, what I realised was that that's a line from the producers where he's yelling at a well-endowed young woman in the street, oh, baby, if you got it, flaunt it. And I realised that I hope she never goes and finds that line. She'll think much more poorly of me.
It is so astonishingly non-PC. So you can't help but think of Weinstein when you're looking at And there's
it's another time. It was another time.
And it's got the original sexy nurse in Lee Meredith.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Dancing in a bikini.
Will I take transcription now? Will I dictation? Exactly. But it's very, very revelatory about what it's like to put on a show, you know, and what it actually really means, and just the sheer practicality of it and the sheer impossibility of knowing how this is going to go.
Just the sheer lovableness of Gene Wilder without doing anything. You just look at him and think, you've got this presence on screen that, you're gorgeous.
And I think, that's Gene, that's 67. I don't know, has he made Chocolate Factory by then? I think this is fairly early in Gene Wilder's career. I don't know if it's the breakthrough sort of role, but it's fairly early on. So, it's just this incredible presence. It's like, and it's also like when you watch films of that era, there's nothing else going on except the frame. You know, the camera will be reasonably still. The acting takes place in the frame. So it's all acting. It's all face and eyes and gesture. Yeah. It's not cut, you know, like we watch so much stuff now there's so much cutting and editing and so much sort of effect put onto it that it can dominate the acting, whereas these are like almost like old style dance films where it's just wide shot, Gene Kelly's going to dance, you know.
Yeah. Well, so you set the bar high, but you've raised it with your book because you've chosen Winnie the Pooh and you're about to hear a grown man cry because I adore those books. Tell me why you have chosen them.
So now we're leaping back in history, obviously.
1920s, wasn't it?
Well, it's published, I think, 27.
I'm not suggesting you read them in the 1920s.
Right. But the 1920s. Well, I chose Winnie the Pooh because it's a book I can never remember. I don't remember reading because it was read to me probably by my mother from the editions that she was given as a child. So you had these crumbly sort of hardback editions, which, you know, were beautiful themselves. The pages are dry and old and yellow and that sort of stuff.
Wonderful drawings.
And then you've got the beautiful E.H. Shepard illustrations, you know, absolutely magnificent. So they're read to me, and then you read them for yourself. And then what I found is that I can go back and, you know, it might be 5 years. Maybe I'd read them again when I was 12 or something like that and still went, oh, these are so beautiful. And then they remain for me a sort of touchstone of how to write. Like these are, you know, A.A. Milne is like Graham Greene or John le Carré, where they come from this era of the perfect sentence. Every sentence is so grammatically exact without being onerous, you know, like it's so light, yet it's so perfect. Like the language is often so light that it's almost like you can skate over the paragraph. You've got to come back and then go, oh, that's so great what you're saying there. You know, it's so beautifully constructed. So it just remains with me as such a beautiful thing. And it's like a lot of your first experiences. This is the first book I really loved. I don't know that I can love a book anymore. Nothing subsequently can really ever touch the love I have for Winnie the Pooh, you know, because it's the first one.
And there was so much right about it. From the, I mean, you're talking about the way that he wrote, but even the use of capital letters, where, you know, Eeyore was having a very bad day, and it's capital A, capital V. Yeah. And does the Valentine family do Pooh sticks?
I've played Pooh sticks with the children, with my children. I don't know that I did. I can't remember doing it as a kid, but yes, you've been somewhere. You go, it's a bridge. We can play Pooh sticks. Let's go.
So that man in 1920 was writing a kiddies book, and then in 2018 I'll be walking through Tasmania, and you go exactly. Oh, it's a bridge. And all my kids run off, get a stick.
That's right. And the beautiful, but also like the characters are so distinct in Winnie the Pooh, which is, I don't know if that's, I'm going to say that's rare in those sort of books. I don't know that that's exactly accurate, but like how consistent and accurate is Eeyore all the time? And how often do you think you meet someone and go, they're a bit Eeyore, aren't they? You know, or how often do you meet someone, how often do you have to work with someone who's Tigger?
Yeah,
you know, a little bit over-enthusiastic, not very effective.
So my missus says that I am Tigger, which is what my son would call a complisalt.
Oh, yeah, nice. Yeah.
And my dad, God love him, he passed away 3 years ago. He would read me those books, and he would always read Eeyore in his Eeyore voice.
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly.
And that is one of my strongest memories of Dad. Now,
can you do your dad's Eeyore voice?
I can't. It's my birthday.
That's right.
And all I've got is a balloon.
That's right. I had to do, there was something, it was like a fundraiser, and you had to read something out, you know, that sort of thing, come along and read a piece of your favourite thing. And I read the last chapter of The House of Pooh Corner, where Christopher Robin says farewell to Winnie the Pooh. Not a dry eye in the house, including me.
I know.
Like, you just start crying because it's so beautiful, and it captures so much that moment of realisation. You know, you can, I don't know if you can remember it, but you can relate immediately to the feeling. You're 6 or 7, you're 5, and you're going to school, and suddenly it's like, I'm not really a baby anymore, am I? I'm not. Oh, I've got to be different now. You know.
So you were in tears on stage.
Yeah. It was terrible. It was a ghastly moment for all.
How horrible. Control yourself, man. But I've got an embarrassing confession about Winnie the Pooh, which is I'm sort of offended and hate anyone bringing it into the modern world. I just want those
the
hardback
Disney
books.
version.
Well, any version. I want the books with the drawings that you describe,
Yeah.
slightly moth-eaten. I don't want it on screen. I don't want it on radio. I just want, my dad reading it to me, basically.
Well, yeah, I'm not as hard and fast about that. I tried to read them to my children, for example, and gave them to my children to read. They couldn't read it. We're too distant from that style of language. Beatrix Potter, the same. These sort of the Gumnuts, May Gibbs stuff. When you look at the language now, people are speaking so differently, and the style of language. It was a glorious day in the forest as we went off to have a walk. It just. The whole rhythm of the sentence is just so contrary to how anybody speaks or writes today that they can't see it. Like my kids can't see a black and white film either.
Right.
They just go, what is wrong with this film?
so unless it starts in this sex tape, I will be showing.
That's right. Yeah, security footage from the corner they can understand. So I'm not hard and fast about that. I can understand that it might take a while. You mightn't be able to get to it until you've had more experience. That it's like you play a scratchy jazz record from the 1920s to the 1950s. I can get it, but it's taken me a long time to be able to understand what's going on there. I don't expect my kid to suddenly go, "Oh, Charlie Parker, how magnificent!"
So I cannot tell you, James, how much I enjoyed researching your choices, and your song blew my mind.
Right.
Now, I might have accessed it in the wrong way because I was reading about the bloody thing, but you chose Jethro Tull's Thick as a Brick.
Oh, did I?
Yes.
Oh, I thought I did the bark thing. Oh, Jethro Tull's Thick as a Brick. Oh, yeah, okay.
I'm telling you, mate, you chose Thick, because that's the one I've researched.
Okay, yeah. Jethro Tull's Thick as a Brick, yes.
So Ian Anderson, the lead frontman of Jethro Tull, played the flute.
Yes.
Well, that's normal for a rock band.
Yes.
But was mind-bendingly clever.
Yeah.
Many people, I hope you're not one of them because I don't want to embarrass you on a podcast, but that album got huge success without people realising it's a parody.
Yeah.
He's pretending it's about Gerald Bostock, an 8-year-old kid who wrote a poem who doesn't even exist.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And it's like in an interview, he said, it's like airplane to airport. He was taking the piss out of Yes and Emerson, Lake and Palmer. Yeah. So he just dashed off a classic album.
Yeah.
Anyway, so that's how I accessed
it. Yeah.
Tell me why you chose it.
Well, it's true. And it comes from that era. So it comes out in something like 74, 75.
72.
Like 72, is it?
Yeah.
And this is an era when rock is very theatrical.
Yeah.
And rock is drawing on a lot of sort of elements of performance art, of theatre. Skyhooks in Australia comes out of this. We're not just going to be guys thumping it out for the pub. We're somewhat theatrical. We've got costumes and a point, and, we're more about performance art. We're a bit dada. We're a bit surreal.
And the album covers are really...
The album covers are dense. Thick as a Brick... Well, the reason that I loved Thick as a Brick was that I was a teenage flute player. Like my first instrument...
I thought sax was your go.
No, my first instrument was flute.
Right.
So I was a whiz on the recorder, like they hand out the recorder at primary school. I was about the only kid that anybody had ever seen who could actually play it and who wanted to play it.
So you were beating women off with a stick. And your recorder.
Oh, I am just so cool. So I quite liked the recorder and I practiced it, so they were sort of a bit freaked out about this. And then so it was suggested that, well, he likes the recorder, get him a flute, So I started practicing the flute and I loved it. I really, I just liked, I was, you'll find this with most people who are musicians. They actually like practicing,
yes.
Because they start to go, oh, that's cool. Oh, if I try that, oh, that's right. Oh, that's better now, isn't it? So you get into it. And so I got right into it. So by 13 or 14, I'm already, like a 7th grade flute player. Like I've done all the classical exams and all that sort of stuff. But I'm also realising that this is very daggy. And I'm also starting to hear all sorts of other music. And one of the first things I heard that wasn't like classical music was Thick as a Brick, which my brother bought. So I've got 2 older brothers, 6 and 8 years older. So they were old enough to start buying proper music of the 70s.
Right.
And bringing it into the house. So I hear Thick as a Brick and go, that's a flute. Good Lord.
There is one.
There is one. And it's not flute going, do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do. It's flute going, do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do. It's dirty flute, like it's this incredible thing. And so I sat with that album cover open, reading. I've read everything on the Thick as a Brick album cover.
The newspaper.
Which looks like a newspaper. Yes. And then, you learn all the lyrics. Really don't mind if you sit this one out. Your words but a whisper, your deafness ain't shout. And then I got to see them. My oldest brother took me to see Jethro Tull in about 75 or 76. They're touring Australia. They did Aqualung first half, Thick as a Brick in entirety second half. Unbelievable, you know. So,
but the talent in that bloke to do it. I was watching this morning, researching this, clips of him being interviewed, months ago. And he now looks like just a sort of an aging dad, but you can just see something shining out of his eyes.
Very strange. Like, basically, he comes from jazz to start with. He's a huge fan of a player called Roland Kirk, Razin Roland Kirk. Loves that sort of, which is a sort of bit R&B jazz and that sort of stuff. Then they also come out of like the prog folk thing, like Steel Eye Span, electric folk and that sort of stuff. They then after that sort of period, they spend about the next 20 or 30 years as headliners at all the metal festivals. So you go and see Metallica and Slasher and Jethro Tull. It's like, what? Is he the only metal flute player in the world? And then the other hilarious thing about Ian Anderson of Jethro Tull is he made money out of music. What did he do with it? He's now Scotland's biggest salmon farmer.
Fabulous.
He's he produces 10% of Scotland's salmon or something like that. It's like, what a guy.
do you remember Adam Faith, the 1950s rock star?
Oh, a little bit, yeah.
So he was successful in the sort of screamy Beatlemania, pre-Beatlemania way.
Right.
But then at age 21, that was that?
Yeah.
And then he went off and had a salmon farming, banking or whatever life. And you go, not unlike, without wanting to blow too much smoke up your backside, Mr. Valentine, yourself. And after the break, I wouldn't mind talking about your place and also referencing your rock stardom.
And the salmon farming.
This is The Five of My Life with James Valentine. Mate, your place, you've chosen on a broad scale, Ultimo, on a slightly narrower scale, the ABC, and an even narrower scale, Studio 221.
Yeah.
Take me through it.
Well, I thought of the place was the one I found the most interesting one to think about because I couldn't quite define exactly what you would mean by that. When people say place that's important to you, you go, well, gosh, do you mean I wonder if most people think, oh, Italy, I love Italy and that means a lot to me. Or New York, I'm always invigorated when I get to New York or something like that. Like, is that how people see it? Or, oh, we've got this beautiful place we always go to on holidays and I always think of that.
So the joy of the question, I've deliberately kept it vague so people come at it in different ways.
Yeah, do people say their bedroom or something?
Yes,
or,
Lane Beachley said the ocean, not Mona Vale Beach, but the ocean. Other people literally say the old armchair next to the fireplace.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So that's why I liked it because I was like, well, I don't really. And then I thought, I don't have a geographical place that means anything more than other things. But the one place that I have been for a very long time is the ABC. And so, in actual fact, it's probably the ABC, which is more of a concept than a place in a way.
How long?
Well, I started there in 87 and I did a children's television show for about 4 years.
So you must have been a child yourself.
I was a
How
child.
old are you, man? 87.
I was the only child announcer who was younger than the audience, And then I did a couple of other things there. I left for about 5 or 6 years. These are the fallow years where I did daytime television and it was a ghastly time. And then I came back. I've been doing radio there since 96. So it's now getting sort of 20 plus years or so. And I had about 2 or 3 years filling in for everybody before that while I was trying to go, give me a job. I love this. Give me a job. So it's a lifelong thing. And it's also like I come from one of those families where, there were radios in every room glued to the ABC. So you just walked around the house and the ABC was always on, So I can reference announcers and programs from 1960 onwards because I heard them, they were there. So I think of it as probably the most important place to me outside of, say, my own home is the radio studio that I've been sitting in for about 20 years every afternoon.
Is it the same one?
Same one.
Right.
And the as a place, it's reasonably dull. It's not dissimilar to what we're sitting in now. They're all just tables and desks and microphones and that sort of thing. But it's a place where I'm probably a version of myself that I really like. You know, the guy, I like the guy on the radio. Like he's kind of fun and curious. I'm also, when I said in the beginning that I've tended to try to stimulate myself, it's like there's only certain circumstances in which I'm really fully occupied, and that tends to be in a performance moment.
So you bring your best self to the studio?
Yeah. So in the studio, it's live to air at 2 PM. I am fully switched on.
Right.
You're getting me fully concentrating. At 1:15, I'm wandering around drifting, but sort of like, I don't know, what'll I do now? Do I need to read that thing? I'm not very, I'm not as engaged. I tend to need an actual moment. Like it's got to be real. It's got to be sort of, and I think that comes a lot from music. I was a musician for many years, and music only happens really when the audience is there or the tape is switched on.
It's just the performance itself.
It's the moment where you have to say, okay, well, this is it. I'm committing to this now. This now has to be as good as I can make it. I've got to do this for the audience. I've got to do this because we're recording this and we're finished at 5. If we don't get this right, we're done. I want this to be that. That brings a whole sort of level of concentration that you just don't get at any other moment.
It's fascinating to hear you talk about this because I love the notion of you're on a tightrope. So if your show starts at 2 or you're going to go on stage, is you have to cope with what has happened in your life. So you might have had an argument with your wife or the producer or the stage might be slippy.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter because you've got to go, James.
That's right.
And so you might be feeling depressed and want to have a lie down, but you've got 3 people sitting in the green room going to come on your show, and you've got to be James Valentine.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So there's that sort of circumstance. But even just on an ordinary day, like in some ways, that sort of day, well, I'm going to have to fight through this, so it sort of helps you concentrate. Well, what about when it's just an ordinary Tuesday? Yeah. How do you actually be engaged? Well, in actual fact, I'm only engaged when it's like that. Like if are we on at 8 o'clock? Do we have to do a show? Okay, I'm there. What are we doing? I fully switch on. Otherwise, I am a little bit vague.
Now you mentioned your musical history, and I just want to ask you about that. You were in a rock band. Is that at the same time as you were on the radio?
No. So I left school. I went to the more or less I went and studied music in Melbourne, studying jazz and classical saxophone. Like I was studying with a teacher. I did that for a year or two, and then I don't like this much. But was already working a lot. So I was working as a musician in various kind of things. I'd be working 5 or 6 nights a week because this is 1980 onwards. You still have to, if you want the sound of a saxophone, you still have to have someone blowing it. There's no sampling, there's no digital thing, and there was music everywhere. Like I was in a band, like a funny little sort of folk rock band, that we had 3 gigs a day. We had a lunchtime gig, a 5 o'clock gig, and then residencies at night from 9 o'clock sort of thing. Like we actually worked all day. We had 5 weekdays. We're in a wine bar between midday and 2.
And did you enjoy those gigs?
No, they were horrible. But they were sort of fun. And I'm 19 or something, so I've got my first gigs. At least I'm getting a gig. So and I'm trying to find out what it is to be a professional musician. I don't come from a musical background or anybody's done anything like this before, so I don't really know what it is. So I'm trying to hack my way through that. Out of that, I get into some rock bands. Like I said, I did a year with Joe Camilleri. That puts me into the sort of Australian rock scene. So then I do Steve Cummings and Kate Sobrano and the people that are around, Pseudo Echo, Kids in the Kitchen, these sort of 80s bands. From that I end up in a band called The Models. And so The Models, and I joined The Models about 6 months before they had a hit. So, and then I'm on their breakthrough album, and they were perfectly successful, but a like a cred band, like very, very cool, very Melbourne, very art sort of thing.
Didn't you tour with OMD, or have I?
Yeah, we did US. So then we did a couple of US tours, and so we took off. We had a number 1, Out of Mind, Out of Sight, and so because I was on that album, then I stayed in the band. So I did that for about 3 years. But it wasn't ever really my music, and rock music is not my music. I'm jazz. I'm classical. I still would rather. All I tend to listen to is Baroque music. Vivaldi and Bach and Telemann, and jazz. The jazz of the 20th century.
So can I hazard a suggestion? Is if you are an accomplished musician, which you are, the thing that you would be asked to do as part of the model, wonderful though they were and are, it would be well within your competency repetitive.
Exactly.
You go,
It's
James,
very
can you play me
repetitive.
that solo again? You go, really?
Yeah, well, it's the same thing. We're playing 6 or 7 nights a week, over and over and over again, and you do the same set over and over once you've got the set. Because this is like the rock set is often determined by the technology, not the band. The lighting guy is running the show. Mate, don't go over to the right of the stage. And like you were there for ages, which meant that the flash pots went off over here. And I had those lights already, and this went on for like longer than it usually does. What are you doing? You know, that's an argument you have after a gig. And so it's like the music is secondary to the sound guy. Mate, I'd already queued up those mics to come on, and you weren't there because this solo just went on forever. What the hell are you doing? You know. So, and that's the further up the scale you go, the harder it is to actually then be spontaneous. You know, you've got to get the whole crew to be jamming. You know,
so I've got a theory that unless you are born to it or one of the 5 or 6 intergalactically famous people, that one of the worst jobs in the world is being a rock star.
Well, it's, you know, Charlie Watts says he's been in the Rolling Stones for 40 years. 27 of that was waiting around.
Yeah.
You know, but like my experience was, I always looked at it. It took us 22 hours to get on stage at 10. You know, like for an hour and a half, and then you know, like you've just played Griffith RSL, and it's midnight. You're staying at the Flag Motor Inn in Griffith. You know, you go back, you get stoned, you get up at 9 o'clock in the morning because you got to drive to Albury, which is 4 hours away, to play at the Albury RSL, and you've got to check into, and you've got a sound check at 5. You know, this is a very dull existence, you know, and it goes, and it's day after day after day. You know, it's not 3 weeks. Like in those days, there was so much, music was the thing. Every town, every pub had bands, 3 bands a night often. That was a standard thing. So every band was out on the road for 6 and 7 nights a week for a year. Like the Models never stopped touring. Right. We were in continual tour mode. We would come in and record and have a month off or something like that. But basically, the next tour was about to start. Well, like when I met my wife, Joanne, I was in the Models, and she wasn't part of that scene. She didn't really care and that sort of stuff. And after a month or two, she's going, what the hell is this? Like, are you ever here? And then you're so out of it that you don't know. She'd say, so what's happening? What are you going away? I go, I don't know. Well, is the tour starting? Yeah, I think it's next week. Where are you going? Don't know. When are you back? Don't know. Because I didn't have to know any of this. So somebody would pick me up and off you'd go, you know. So
I'm not condoning it, but I can absolutely imagine why rock stars do serious drugs. Oh, you lose your brain. Like there's nothing else to do, and so you turn to drugs. It's very, I would say that there might have been 30% of the bands were reasonably clean. The rest of it is like, of course you're smoking dope all day, and it just becomes a food group. I mean, I considered that I thought it was standard after a while, because everybody did. You'd get in the car. The standard piece of equipment you needed in a rock hire car is a Frisbee, because you turn the Frisbee upside down and you can roll a joint in it, and it doesn't go everywhere. So, the Frisbee was not for exercise at lunchtime. So thank God you found the ABC, or the ABC found you. But I just got to a point where I just went, look, this is not my life. I'm not intending to be a rock musician for the rest of the Models. Sort of broke up and I left, and I just put out looking for other work, and I got an audition for a kids' TV show at the ABC, and I got the job. So that was it. I went, okay, well, I'm done. I'm going to stay in Sydney now, and I'm going to go off and do that. I kept playing. We had a band called Absent Friends, which had a hit with Wendy Matthews called I Don't Want to Be With Nobody But You, and that was sort of leftovers in the Models and a couple of In Excess and that sort of stuff. And then I did Wendy's band for a couple of years after that as well. But then I just went, no, look, I'm not going to be a player as such. And I didn't play for some years. I then had a jazz quartet a couple of years ago for a couple of years, which was like I just went, I just want to do the thing I actually set out to do. Can I just play? I'm just going to have a band that plays jazz. We're not going to try and do anything else. I want to play the jazz tunes I love. I want to see if I can actually play it. It was pretty good, and I got my playing back to a reasonable level and went, there you go, not bad. I could actually do it. Thanks. And again, I just went, that's enough of that now, I'll leave it. So you mentioned the rock car, which moves me on to your possession. So you have chosen a 1976 BMW 2002 car.
2002 is how it's usually referred to. I think you'll find.
And from I know the square root of fuck all about cars,
Right.
and I care even less.
Right.
But apparently, the 02 series is the series that broke BMW internationally.
It's the series just before your common 3 series, your 325, your 321. They come through in the sort of, mid-80s onwards. The 2000 series is sort of like a 70s, late 60s into 70s kind of series. The 2002 was a little sort of sporty car. It slants. So the front is on a diagonal and the back is on a matching diagonal. So they're a little sort of, cute little thing. The reason I chose this was I have an unnatural attraction and love for cars.
Okay.
Which comes, and I don't mean that I behave unnaturally around them. My father was a car dealer. So when I grew up, he ran a service station and a small car dealership in Ballarat in country Victoria. He sold Renaults, Peugeots, and later on BMWs. Now this was a ridiculous choice for country Victoria.
I was going to say,
what
about a Holden or a Ford?
Exactly. Who wants a Renault 12 in Ballarat in 1972? I'll tell you who. School teachers. Who does my father hate? School teachers. The only people coming in to buy cars from my father were bearded school teachers, greenies, a bit hippie. Oh, I wouldn't mind a French car. Get out of here, you bludger. So
did he ever make any money?
No, it's terrible at it. But I grew up around cars. Cars were everywhere. It's like, and we had Peugeots and Renaults. We had old Peugeots, 203s, 403s, things from the 50s and 60s. My grandfather had a couple of acres out of town, and we stored these old cars out there. Like we had, at one point, my brothers had a 1945 Citroen. Because it's sort of like because if you work with cars, cars just turn up. People just dump them on you. Or my father, they'd be traded in to my father. He'd give them $100 for it and try and sell them a Peugeot 504 or something like this. So it was part of my upbringing. Just as I knew, my mother's reading me Winnie the Pooh. From my father and my brothers, I understood it was what you had to know was the model and the make and model of every car on the road. That's a 56 Vanguard standard. Probably not the GT version. Not that I think they made a GT with the standard. That's an EK Holden, not an E8. It's an EK. So you knew everything. Like my father, because he's a car dealer, my father knew all the number plates. So he'd go, "Oh, Jack sold that one." Right. Or that's one I sold a few years ago. So in Ballarat, the landscape of Ballarat to me was cars. I just saw cars everywhere. And so then you had these things you desired, that's a cool car, you want one of those. And so one of my brothers still to this day is obsessed with collecting Renault 16s, Renault 12s, Renault 8s of the era that my father sold. These are not an interesting car. This is like collecting a Renault 12 is like collecting a Toyota Camry. It's not a particular. There's nothing cool about it. Both of my brothers at one point have had to own Porsches, so they've had Porsche 911s. Both hated them, but it was this sort of ambition.
Do you drive now? Have you got a car?
Well, that's the point. The peak of this was my 76 BMW 2002, which I had a couple. Sort of like and loved it and all that sort of stuff. And even at the time, I thought, God, it's weird the way I just love this thing. I just really love this car. I'd gaze at it. I'd just look at it. I love this car. It's fantastic, And then it sort of needed a lot of money spent on it. My kids were young. But this was when I was at primary school. When the kids were at primary school, I still had this. There were parents who wouldn't let their kids get in it because there's no airbags and seatbelts and stuff. And so you'd go, I can give them a lift. And you go, they are not getting in that thing. Good Lord. I'm going, what? It's cool. It's German engineering. It'll be fine. And so eventually I sold it at that sort of point and just somebody else to restore because it needed the sort of full restoration by some point. And it's sort of like what I noticed was that was it. That was I finished.
You satiated yourself.
Cars started to seem less and less important. I didn't, but also it was no longer possible to own those classic cars of that era without a garage and restoration and all that sort of stuff. So I sort of lost all interest and now I'm more like, there's still a large part of my heart that cares about it, but it can't care about it because it just doesn't matter. Oh, it's a Subaru Forester. Yeah, great. I don't care. There's nothing I can attach to in modern cars because to me they're all the same car. Well, what is the difference between a Kia, a Hyundai and a Subaru? I'll
tell you, because we drive Mazda. A 17-year-old Toyota Tarago.
Right.
And the difference is, mate, sliding doors.
Oh,
if you've got 4 kids,
sliding
that's
doors
the go.
good.
It's not really sex, rock and roll.
No,
but
no, exactly. So it's and it's almost like there's almost in that car is also the last time I really cared about a possession. I don't think there's much I own. Even like my saxophone is a 1956 Selmer Mark VI saxophone. It's a beautiful classic instrument. These are the prince of saxophones, that sort of stuff. But even now, I know that could disappear. I get another one. Like it's not. You know what I mean? Like they're not. The world is full of stuff. It'll come and go through you. I really don't care that much about it. It's like guitars. People go, "Oh, this is a beautiful guitar." There's another one. The one next to it's beautiful too. Like they're all beautiful. They're all great. I don't like. And so something about the ownership of that car and then that car going, that's about the last time I really cared about any particular possession.
So I'm
not particularly Buddhist about it, like I'm not sort of like, I just mean I really, the leather jacket I'm wearing I love as much as that car, you know what I mean? But if I lost it right now, there's another one will turn up,
The ABC website, you might not know that people are saying this about you, says that no one sees the world quite like James Valentine.
I keep meaning to take that down. I hate
honestly,
that.
Make tickets on yourself.
Yeah.
But I have got to say, I have adored this conversation. You are so generous and you have been just fascinating. So one last trick question.
Yes.
Who do you want next on Five of My Life?
Oh, that's good. That's a good one. Yeah, and I like that you didn't...
They can't be dead and they can't be fictional.
Yeah, right. And I like that you didn't... I haven't prepared for this.
So you're going to appear to be a total clueless numpty.
So I am clueless sort of numpty, that's a Scott Morrison word, that one. Some of those numpties are doing that sort of stuff. Who would I like to hear on Five of My Life? Well, see, I mean... I'll give you the real challenge, not somebody famous.
But thank you, because my dream for this is and now I'm here on Five of My Life with Dave, my next door neighbour. Yeah, because everyone I think is half an hour interesting.
Well, that's right, but it's also someone. The trick I often think to this kind of form, and with my own show and a lot of stuff on the ABC, is that they'd search for people whose story we don't know.
Yes.
And trying to find...
I don't want to rehash someone's career.
I don't need... I know Lane Beachley. She's great. She's fantastic. It's a great story. But we have heard that story. And she has told that story. And she's probably sick of that story.
Yeah. No, I'm with you.
And even though this approach is good because it digs in and asks people to, think about their life in a different kind of way.
Sure.
It is also then, what about the often like people like the head of St. Vincent's Hospital or something is like a really, like they can be, you suddenly go, look at what they've done.
Yes.
So I don't know who that is or if the story is particularly great.
We're going to get him or her on.
Okay.
James Valentine, thank you for coming on Five of My Life.
Mr. Marsh, pleasure.
The Five of My Life was presented by me, Nigel Marsh. Producer, Alex Mitchell. Sound production and theme music by Darcy Thompson and Matt Nicholish.